Ready? You know that story last night which I told? The story last night that I told and didn't finish?
Which story?
Sorry?
You didn't finish the end.
Indeed. What was the beginning?
Yes.
A lady was mistreated and she was killed by your guardians, and when someone say you must have a terrible past, and then she said, oh, no.
Ah, yes. Thank you. I'm glad that somebody has a good memory here. Thank you. I remember now. I'll just wait for everyone to come in first. Okay, this is 8 o'clock now. And that particular story, which I hadn't finished off yesterday, it's a beautiful story because it inspired me. And I did tell it the last time I was at the Hong Kong Chinese University in Shatin. And there's a very intelligent student there was kind of arguing. And honestly, I do like it if people challenge me and they say, is that really true? Can that really happen? Because I don't say things unless I can argue them or understand them and give you quotations or give you the stories why these things actually work. I don't just want people to believe blindly. So this particular case, I was trying to say how you can let go of the past, anything of the past, even some of the worst things of the past which may have happened to you. And I mentioned about that organization here in Perth called Assets. Remember now? An Australian Society for the Survivors of Torture and Trauma. There's a group of psychologists, psychiatrists, therapists who were assisting people who'd come over to Australia to seek asylum for one reason or another because they were badly abused in some of these camps. You may have heard some of these terrible situations which people find them in. It's one of the reasons also that we never call this meditation concentration. If we did, what would this place be called? A concentration camp. We don't want to have that association with that name. That's when people were really tortured and killed. So instead of calling it a concentration camp, what do we call this place? As well as Jhana Grove, what its nickname is? Club Med Serpentine. You call it Club Meditation. Club Med for short. And that gives it a totally different understanding. You feel this is a place of enjoyment, and that's true, of peace, and of being able to relieve yourself of many burdens. And I never, honestly, when I started teaching, I never realized how powerful these teachings can actually be. And every now and again, somebody takes up these teachings, develops them a little bit further, and turns into wonderful techniques or therapies to assist all sorts of difficult situations. One of the most difficult ones is people who have been in difficult countries where there has been no stability, no safety, and they've just been in the wrong place at the wrong time and got themselves arrested and got themselves into really big trouble. And there are countries, I'm proud to say, like Australia, which can invite you in and say, please come and find some physical safety here. And I'd be very disgusted with Australia if it never did that. I know some countries are just refusing migrants, especially those who have gone through a very difficult time. And I think that's kind of disgusting. But nevertheless, in Australia, that people can ask for some asylum when they've been very badly treated, and they're given asylum. And that freedom they have, unfortunately, is only physical. They know they can live and they can find a job maybe, or get a pension and get food to eat and a place to stay. But that's not the whole of life. We need more than that. And what these group of therapists were noticing, that you do need that emotional freedom, that psychological freedom. And of course, the biggest prison that those asylum seekers from overseas face is their memory of the pain they've been through, the emotional trauma, being really offended, please excuse the language, but the Buddha said, please talk, openly, being raped and beaten and abused and threatened. And when that happens, it's such a hard thing to let go of. It's okay to say you let go of, a little bit of bad luck, you missed your flight, or, that you got discarded from work and your job was given to somebody else. That's a small thing compared to some of these really terrible things which happen to people. And this group of, therapists, they came to see me one evening to invite me to their centre called ASSETS, Australian Society of Survivors of Torture and Trauma. And I did not know why. I recognized many of them being disciples. And then they told me that they got their permission, their authority to teach or to represent sort of psychology or therapy and get the place running because of their degrees from university. But what really interested me was when they said, but all the practical stuff, the stuff they actually do, was based on the teachings they've got either here or at Dhammaloka Centre in Nollamara. That's why they wanted me to come and visit them. And so when I went there, when you sort of give these teachings and you see how powerful they are and how far they reach, that was something I would never forget. And one of those teachings was the opening the door of your heart. Simile. I think you all remember where that came from my father. Before he died, a couple of years before he passed away, I was just a 14-year-old boy, and he was taking me back from school, in his old car, And he parked the car on a side street, and he turned to me to tell me, "Son, whatever you do in your life, however you turn out, I want you to always remember the door of my house will always be open to you." The door of his house. And I mentioned many times that my father was very poor because he was often very sick. And the house which he lived in was just what we call like a council flat. I've been to many houses in places like Hong Kong, apartments, and they're notoriously small. I remember one friend said that when he was staying at his colleague's house, he always had to open the window so he could stick his feet out, so he could stretch. The room wasn't big enough. And I can understand that. Fortunately, I'm not too tall. But some of these sports players these days, they're very tall. I don't know how they can even fit inside one of these small apartments. But anyhow, the apartment in Acton, where my father had a little apartment, that was also very small. And we didn't have much stuff in there. And so I still remember that when he said that, the door of our house will always be open to you, my first thought was, actually that's not opening up very much. Because, as I often mention, the house or the flat, the apartment, whatever you call it, where I grew up, we didn't worry if we never locked the door. Because my father explained that please don't lock the door. We're kind of hopeful if a burglar comes in, they'll take pity on us and leave something. That was kind of, how poor we were, even living in London. But nevertheless, I think I mention to you that the primary school I went to, which was the local primary school, which many other poor kids went to, there was also a famous man went to that primary school, and then he also passed the test and got the scholarship to go to this much bigger, more expensive school over in Hammersmith. And only found out that just a few months ago. And that person, who preceded me by about 3 years, so I would have seen him, he'd probably been a prefect or something when I was going to these schools. He became very famous. I forget what his name was. He was an actor, but apparently he became Professor Snape in the Harry Potter movies. So I went to the same primary school with Professor Snape. Fortunately, he wasn't one of the teachers, he was just a fellow student at the time. So anyway, it was a poor school, but nevertheless my father said in the house, however you turn out, whether you become notorious, or you become wealthy, or you become famous, or you become infamous, or you become a monk, the door of his house would always be open. And as a young boy, sometimes I knew how to do my studies at school, but my emotional intelligence was not that great yet. You need years to grow and to understand what that meant. It was only when I became a monk, when you had all the time in Thailand to remember all of these wonderful experiences, only then did I think what my father really meant. The door of his heart would always be open to me, no matter how I ever turned out. He never closed his father's love to me, no matter what. And that really meant a huge amount to me when I understood what he was saying. He was dead by now. He died when I was only 16. But nevertheless, I always count that as my most important inheritance, which is why I named that first book which I wrote, opening the door of your heart, because it meant so much to me. That's the English title. And for those of you who don't know how that book originated, for a long time I never ever wanted to write a book, because I was told by, I remember this Zen monk who came to teach over in London many years ago. I still remember him, that he could hardly speak any English when he first came. And then when he went to tour around the UK, then when he came back to London, somebody asked him this question: "You've been visiting UK for about 2 or 3 weeks. What is your impression of Buddhism in UK?" And he still hadn't learnt much English, but he learnt enough English to give a very articulate reply. And he said, "Books, books, books. Too many, too many, too many. Dustbin, dustbin, dustbin." And everybody knew what he meant. It's a study of Buddhism, but not the practice of Buddhism. And it was experiences like that which kind of discouraged me from writing. I prefer to practice. But then he also emphasized, and it kind of scared me, anyone who writes a book has to spend the next 7 lifetimes reborn as a donkey. How many books have I written now? Oh my goodness. I got so many incarnations of a donkey in front of me. So if you ever see a donkey, please be kind to them. That could be me in the future. So I was not encouraged to write books. But then, where that book, Opening the Door of Your Heart, came from, all these stories which I tell you, some people really liked them a lot. And there were some people, some ladies who were going through separations in their marriage, divorces, and some of those stories really helped them, big time. So much so that one of them said, "Look, it is not correct not to share those stories more widely. Can you please write them in a book?" And I said, "No." They said, "It's just too much work." But then I took sort of pity. I was supposed to be a Theravada, Hinayana, out for my own enlightenment, not to be kind and compassionate towards others. It's a bit of a fake, isn't it? So anyway, so I said, "Well, look, let's have a compromise. You write the book from my stories and I'll edit it for you. I'll give you permission." So she wrote about 3 stories and handed them to me as an example. They were terrible. You couldn't even start to edit them. Made a mess of the stories. I didn't realize how smart she was. That's how she tricked me into writing the book myself. Because I couldn't let it be published when she made a mess of it. So, and this was one of the reasons I tell this story. It was fascinating, for me anyway. I was doing a personal retreat, nearly 15 days, where you can stay in your room and just meditate all day. And usually food is sent up to you, so you don't have much to do. I say, I'm not going to waste the preciousness of solitude and rest, just for writing a book. But it was a great opportunity. 1 hour a day, I would write something and then see how much got done. And I kept to that very strictly. Only 1 hour. Writing by hand. We didn't have computers. So I wrote it out by hand, 1 hour a day. And only for 14 days, I had half the book completed, actually over half the book. And I couldn't believe it. I never decided, let's just do a little bit more. It was very strict, 1 hour, not an hour and 10 minutes or an hour and 5 minutes. Exactly 1 hour. And then I stopped and I looked at it. I still have the original manuscript and all written out by hand, and it hardly needed any editing at all. That was what was weird. All the stories just flowed. You didn't need to sort of change this or change that. And that was kind of like a sign of the power of meditation. And then, when I had another, few days, I made sure I did my meditation very strongly, and then finished the book in another few days. Just writing it out by hand, no corrections. And it's amazing just how that manuscript, it's in my room. Maybe I've got a few days, maybe I can bring it and just show you just how perfect the writing is. Sometimes people ask me, what script was that? What computer did you use? It's just by hand. And even I look at that for inspiration, what meditation can do. Give you some accuracy, neatness. And so what I did, having finished the book, I didn't bother just trying to edit it. Then I gave it to one of the gentlemen, he was retired, and he was typing it up on his machine and putting it on a CD. And then I was going over to Melbourne to give a series of talks. And when I went to Melbourne, he just finished the CD, the computer version of the manuscript, just about a couple of hours before I left Perth to go to the airport to get my flight. And when I arrived in Melbourne, the first gig was at Melbourne University. And so I gave a talk there. Hadn't sort of rested or washed or anything yet. And then I went to the university, gave a talk, and then this lady came up to me. She said, that was a lovely talk you gave. And she said, I work in the publishing industry. If ever you have any talks you would like to have published, please let me see them. And all I did was put my hand in my bag. Here you are. That's how easy it was to find a publisher. The publisher found me. And I will never forget her name. She had a wonderful name, Magnolia Flora. She was such a flowery lady. And of course, that became, in many countries, a bestseller. I've mentioned to you it was published years ago, and now it is a new edition published in Kazakhstan, which is weird to me. But anyway, they want to publish it, why not? So that's how these things happen when they're meant to be. And it's so easy to do. So the reason I tell that story, is that they say books, 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 too many, dustbin, dustbin, dustbin. If it's kind of meant to be, you don't need a dustbin. Just the publisher comes to find you. And it does a lot of really good work. And one of the good works it's done is, when people read it, they realize that some of these unique therapies go against what other people teach, but they work. And that was the opening the door of your heart. So they told me in this little center they have over in Perth that first of all, if somebody is really hurting from some trauma in the past, one of the first things which is needed was to feel safe. Because you'll always have some doubt. People have taken advantage of you in the past. And you always think that maybe that could happen again. So it takes a while to get that trust. And I can understand that from when you come to a meditation retreat. for many of you it's the first time in Jhana Grove. Can you trust this place? Can you trust all the people who work here? Can you trust the people who cook your food for you? Believe it or not, many years ago, I had a lot of difficulty finding a cook for the 9-day retreat. And the reason we had a lot of trouble finding a cook for the 9-day retreat, the usual cook, her husband developed cancer. And she said, I'm sorry to cancel the last moment, but looking after my partner is more important than looking after you guys. So she cancelled, and that left me with no cook for the retreat. And then I thought, contemplated, and there's one guy I knew who, was a very good cook and very hard-working. He was a good Buddhist, and he would come to a lot of our talks. I decided to give him a try. His name was Carl, C-A-R-L, and he could get the time off, to do the cooking for us. So he came on this 9-day retreat, and I couldn't believe how well his food was regarded. One day I remember I was giving the talks, but I went there to look beforehand and look afterwards. He made pizzas all by himself, even the dough base, and cooked the whole thing. But not just Western food, all types of food. He did it all by himself. I think other people helped chop the vegetables for him. He was such a nice fellow, so hard-working. When it came to the end of the retreat, what do we do at the end of the retreat? You do the metta meditation, and then we give forgiveness and thanks for all the people who helped on the retreat. And then all the retreatants, mostly I think from Singapore, all the retreatants said, "Where's Carl? He was such a great cook. He was so friendly, so nice. Where's he gone? Can't we give permission? Can't we give the thanks and appreciation for him? He never charged anything." And I said, "Well, he's actually gone home now." "Where's home?" "Just up the road here, Carnet Prison Farm." He was a prisoner on work release. And then they asked, what did he do? He was sent to jail for rape. And then all the people in the room, they froze. What? You let a convicted rapist come and cook for us on this retreat? Yes. He did that many years ago, when he was into drugs, had a long sentence. He's always been coming to our meditation classes over in the prison farm. I trust him. And he could be trusted. Those silly things he did was a long time ago. Can't we forgive him? I even told the story of Angulimala. Angulimala even was a serial killer. And the Buddha trusted him. And he became an enlightened monk. And I did that, and I deliberately didn't tell anybody till the retreat was ended and he was back in prison because his work release dates were over. And then I told them, why do we judge people? We judge people far too harshly. When I told people, they were surprised. But then, they learned a great lesson there. They learned a great lesson of why do we worry so much. I knew him very well. And many people trusted me that I knew what I was doing. But here, I don't think we have any prisoners on this retreat. I don't know about what you've been doing in Hong Kong, what you've been doing in Indonesia. But if you're doing meditation you understand you do need that trust. Now you're closing your eyes, you're sitting down and not paying attention to what's happening around you. And so there is a sense of vulnerability. And that's one of the reasons why in all of these retreats which we do, we insist that people do keep precepts. The precepts give you that sense of living amongst safe people. Safe people, we don't want to harm each other, don't want to steal, don't want to commit any sexual offences, don't want to lie or take alcohol or drugs, which make people do all sorts of stupid things, like poor old Carl when he was young. He was released many years ago, and he now still comes and volunteers at Bodhinyana Monastery every now and again. He's really very, very strong. And because we gave him those chances, basically he'll do anything for us. I'll trust him with anything. And because of that trust, we have a sense of we can relax to the max. If you're always worried about, there's a very strange person over there, why does he always keep looking at me? There's a very weird lady over there, why is she always smiling at me? Hello, Ajahn. Once, I don't mind telling these stories, that once that I mentioned that some monks disrobe, that's part of life. But I mentioned that when a monk disrobes, and they usually disrobe if they're very young, and they usually make excellent husbands. There's not many men you could marry who know how to wash dishes, know how to cook, know how to even wash somebody else's clothes. That's what they have to do for me. Do you need a robe washed, Ajahn Brahm? And they go and wash it for me. They cook the food which I really like. They're very well trained. And a few ladies, I mentioned I just did a marriage ceremony for one of the ex-monks who got married, and she came up to me and said, "Thank you so much for training my husband." So after that, some ladies said, "Are there any more monks about to disrobe? If there are, please put me on the list for number one." Just messing around. But anyway, to be able to feel safe and you can trust the people around you, that's important for success in meditation. That's one of the reasons why we do emphasize precepts and things like not having any alcohol or drugs. If you have alcohol or drugs, you don't know what you're doing. And a lot of difficulties arise because of that. Just the good people here. And sometimes, I know a lot of you, not everyone, but sometimes you just look at each other, you can tell if a person's a dodgy character. And I can't see any dodgy characters in this room. You've always got a good record, so you're safe. And because people are safe, you can relax. So in this organization, the first thing which they have to establish is the trust which everybody has for one another in this group assets. You're not going to take advantage of anybody at all. So there's no consideration of things like money. That's why we never charge for retreats here. I don't know how much the Bodhinyana, the Biff group, or the Hong Kongese charge, but that's just to look after the travel and other arrangements. But you never charge anything for the monastery. My fee for charging each one of you is the happiness which you give me. When I see you get into lovely meditations, your lives getting better, that is my payment. And you paid me so many times for that. And that's not just a scam, that is absolutely true. And that is one of the reasons why in this assets group, once the trust has been established, once that goodness has been established. I don't think I told you yet about the precepts. That if you can't keep the 5 precepts or the 8 precepts, or you know what sometimes people do in Sri Lanka? They keep the 13 precepts. Have you heard about the 13 precepts yet? They keep the 8 precepts in the morning, and at noon they switch over to the 5 precepts. 8 plus 5 equals 13. And that's a scam! Because the only difference between the 5 precepts and the 8 precepts, the main difference, is that if you keep the 8 precepts, you can't eat in the afternoon. So they keep that precept, only eating in the morning, and then they switch to the 5 precepts in the afternoon so they can have a dinner. So anyway, to keep it clear and honest and effective, I ask people to please keep the 2 precepts. The 2 precepts are never doing anything intentionally which hurts or harms another living being. Second precept, not doing anything intentionally which hurts or harms oneself. And that's where the precepts come from. It makes it so obvious. Why would you ever want to do anything which hurts another or hurts yourself? So when you become harmless, even the animals notice that, and they will never ever harm or hurt you. And I say I love those stories, which you see they're kind of weird but wonderful, where the animals in the world will never hurt or harm you. Even I remember that story, you probably heard it, of my preceptor. I was having an appointment with him, and he was the acting Sangharakja of Thailand at the time, very important monk. But then, because he was late, I realized he can't keep appointments to the dot if you're such an important position. So I was waiting for him, and what do when I wait for somebody? I just cross my legs and meditate. So I was meditating for about 20 minutes, and then he turned up, and when I heard him come in, then I opened my eyes and he looked at me, and it brought some nostalgia to him, because he said when he was a young monk, he would learn meditation, but he hasn't done any for quite a few years now, simply because he's doing so much other work for the community, for the country. And so then, because he had this nostalgia about when he was a young monk and could meditate, he said that he grew up in the island of Samui over in Thailand, South Thailand. And that's mostly a tourist place these days. But he said his teacher told him to meditate in the coconut plantation, the coconut grove. And he said he was meditating one day in the coconut plantation, and one day he got a very nice, calm meditation. And when he came out of the meditation, when he opened his eyes after a couple of hours, he just opened his eyes, very peaceful, and noticed something very strange. There was a snake coiled up in his lap. And he recognized that snake straight away. That was one of the very dangerous snakes on the island of Samui. And he'd been told by his teachers, by his family, if you ever see a snake like that, please keep away. It's very venomous. And the venom is very, very dangerous, will probably kill you. And there's one of these snakes coiled up in his lap. And he told me, he said, the strangest thing, which he really was so surprised at, there was no fear in him at all. He's just coming out of a deep meditation, and he had no fear, only kindness to the snake, was happily sleeping on his lap. I don't know what is the most dangerous snake in Indonesia? What is it? Anyway, that's just getting you thinking, if one of those was caught up on your lap here in Jhana Grove, how would you feel? Ah! Don't get upset. Keep calm. That snake has chosen you to have a nice rest, to have a nice sleep. And so that little, Somdek Gyo, that's his kind of nickname, that he just sat there and just was amazed. He had no fear at all, and only loving kindness towards this dangerous snake coiled up in his lap. And after about 10 minutes, then the snake uncoiled and just crawled away calmly. He said that was the power of that peace and stillness and kindness. You don't have to be afraid. And I like stories like that. As I mentioned to you before, if the animals of the world are not afraid of you, then you don't need to be afraid of those animals. You live a much more peaceful life. So once we have, usually in a meditation retreat, where many of you have never met each other before, it's that trust, because you all keep precepts. That means that you feel a sense of safety. You sit down and close your eyes and forget about all duties in life. Just allow the mind to be peaceful. And that's what they had to do in this organization called Assets. Once that was established, then they could get these victims of really serious abuse to sit on a chair and close their eyes. Imagine if you have these memories. They say just sit down and close your eyes. Would you keep one eye open just in case? You've been abused before, and it really hurts big time. So it takes a lot of courage, and you only get that courage from the sense of safety. You can close your eyes and start the meditation on opening the door of your heart, no matter what, no matter to whom. And what they usually happen, they were telling me, sitting on a chair, they open the door of their heart, their eyes are closed, and what they see usually is their past, because their past has never been dealt with, and it's very painful, very hard to bear. And so how it was described to me, they look, with their eyes closed, they look with their mind, and it may be this woman sees this little girl who was so badly beaten for no reason or another, but she could not escape. Someone she trusted really hurt her. Or she sees herself, again, please excuse the language, but this is how it was told to me, was really brutally raped, even though she was a very young girl, underage. She didn't know what was going on, only it hurt a lot. And she sees that little girl in front of her. And then the next stage of the kind of therapy is you imagine this little girl you recognize, that was me many years ago. And you imagine in your heart region, 2 doors open up. You're opening the doors of your heart to this little person you once were, who trusted, was so abused. You open the door of your heart and you imagine a little ladder. Well, not a ladder, but those, in aircraft when they have these stairs which you walk down, and these little stairs going down to the ground. And you, the lady who can protect herself now, who's not hurt by any present enemies, you're inside, safe. You see that's part of you outside, on the ground, alone, terrified. And then the final part of the therapy, you say to that little girl you once were, come in, come up. And you're not trying to get rid of your past anymore. You're trying to be kind to it, opening the door of your heart to who you were in the past, no matter who that was. And you can imagine how much encouragement was needed to get that person you've been afraid of, because that time hurt so much, to actually to come into your own heart. When that little girl reaches the top flight of stairs, a big hug. I will never keep you out of my memory ever again. You're part of me. Welcome home. And that's like opening the door of your heart, no matter who you were or what happened to you. And I must admit, when I first heard that, I thought, wow, I never expected it to be used like that. But when you saw the results, this lady, I will never forget her, because she came to Perth. So she came to she came to Nollamara to a Friday night talk and to introduce herself. She was one of those victims of torture and abuse overseas somewhere. And straight away you could see that she was a woman who was like a saint, really strong and almost impervious to anything negative. And so, but I didn't have a chance to talk to her. Someone else was talking to me. And I saw one of the boys out the corner of my eye talking to her. And the boy, the young man, was saying, that was terrible what happened to you. Did that really happen to you? That's disgusting. That's terrible. And then she told him, you have no right to say that was terrible. It didn't happen to you. And that's given me the meaning of my life. Made me who I am today. And she said that with such power. It was immense. That therapy had actually worked for her. And once it had, she had this amazing amount of freedom. If she could if she could transcend that, she could transcend anything. So that was a little therapy, which this meditation had taught her. How she could let go of the abuse of the past. Not by ignoring it, not by pretending it never happened, but by bringing it into her heart, uniting with it. So a lot of times you've heard me say that if ever you tread in the dog poo, never scrape it off your shoes. Take it home with you and dig it under your mango tree in your garden. And then after a while, your mangoes will be sweeter and sweeter and juicier than ever before. But I always tell people, yeah, they're sweeter and juicier, but people waste the opportunity for realizing what you're really eating is dog poo. It's been transformed into the juiciest, sweetest of mangoes. That's how the world works. All that terrible abuse, that terrible pain, the disappointment, being treated unfairly, being treated cruelly, that's past now. It's been transformed. And these are powerful, wise, compassionate women. And you want to listen to her. She's been through such a tough training. Not because she wanted it, it just happened. You've just gone through to the other side of it. And that's really sadhu, sadhu, sadhu. And it all comes from opening the door of your heart. So what's ever happening to you, what's ever happened, letting it in and treating it like dog poo. Rather it didn't happen to you, but then you've transformed it into the sweetest compassion and the most delicious of wisdom. And that's a story which I told over in the Chinese University in Hong Kong, over in Sha Tin. And this lady, when she was trying to sort of argue that me saying you let go of the past, you can't let go of the past. You're a guy, you don't know what it feels like sometimes. And then she was crying afterwards. Thank you. You got through to her. It's possible. It can be done. That's why some of these stories you hear, please don't just confine them to just what you do to get deep meditation. It's what you can do to solve some of the problems in life which other people just can't solve. And you can become an amazing human being as a result. So I was very proud of that group, Assets. I mentioned them a lot. And people get the message, it's real, it's true. There's nothing you cannot let go of. Transcend and become a much better person as a result. You can't give a mango tree too much dog poo. It just gets sweeter and sweeter and more inspiring. That's why those similes, I love them. And what the Buddha used to say is that the simile of the anger-eating monster, that was another simile which is based on a simile in the suttas. And I decided, and I'm sure the Buddha would not object when you take a simile which the Buddha said, and you add a bit here and add a bit there, you just expand it and make it more easy to understand in our modern world. The original story was this big monster came in and people said, get out of here, you don't belong, get out, get out, get out. And the monster kept getting bigger and bigger and bigger. The way I tell the story, there was this woman who, she was a prime minister. And when she went to the temple to listen to a Dhamma talk, when she got back to her residence, she found out that a monster had got into her residence and was sitting on her chair. And all of the guards and security were so lazy, when they saw this monster they were just afraid, so they hid behind the flower pots. They opened the cupboard doors and hid in there, or they just hid under the chairs. So they didn't stop the monster from coming in and sitting on the Prime Minister's chair. And as soon as they sat on the Prime Minister's chair, then the security and the soldiers said, you don't belong here, you've got no right to sit where our Prime Minister sits, get out, quick. And every unkind word or threat or unkind deed, that monster just kept getting bigger and uglier and more violent. And even the smell coming off that dirty monster got worse and worse and worse. And when the Prime Minister came back, the Prime Minister saw this huge monster sitting in her chair. He looked so ugly, so violent, so capable of anything bad. And as I always say, the smell coming off this monster was so bad that even the maggots, the maggots, which sometimes live in filth, even the maggots couldn't stand the smell of the monster, and they threw up as well. They were sick. Ugh. But the Prime Minister, the reason why she was the head is because she was smart. And straight away she said, welcome, monster. Thank you for coming to visit me. Why have you waited so long to pop in? Has anyone got you a cup of tea yet? Has anyone got you some fruit juice? How about something to eat? You got some leftover from breakfast? What would you like to... And she was sincere. Even though this monster looked really ugly and frightening, she really was kind to the monster. So what happened to the monster? The monster started to look less angry, would say less harsh words, and would get smaller and smaller. You notice if you get angry at me, you get bigger and bigger. Urgh. But if you're kind to me, you get smaller and smaller and smaller. I can't really act that part, but I think you understand what I mean. And so eventually, the Prime Minister was so kind to the monster that the monster got smaller and smaller and smaller and smaller. And all the other security understood their mistakes and joined in. Some of them decided, well, what do you like to eat? You're a monster. Over in Perth, I know they have monster-sized pizzas. Do you have those in Indonesia, in Java? Yeah. So if ever you see a monster, they love monster-sized pizzas. Suitable. What about Hong Kong? Can you get a monster pizza? You can't. What can you get monster-sized? Anyway, so they ordered a pizza for the monsters. You know what some of these guards did? They were very innovative. You ever seen the size of a monster's head? They're huge. Imagine the stress they have in their shoulders and their neck. So some of the guards gave the shoulder a neck massage. Oh, they really loved that because it's so rare to get a neck massage if you're a big, dangerous, scary monster. But loved every moment. Just a bit over there. Oh yeah, oh, that's nice. And some other soldiers gave the monster a foot massage. Have you ever had a foot massage? Is that nice? Imagine a monster getting a foot massage. Oh, he loved that so much. And they were so kind to that monster, sincerely kind, that it got smaller and smaller and smaller and smaller, until it soon got so small that one more act of kindness and the monster vanished totally away. And the Buddha called that an anger-eating monster. Eats anger. Get out of here, you don't belong. And they get worse and worse and more trouble. Instead of saying, get out of here, you don't belong, go and get it a pizza. Give it a foot massage. Sometimes people don't underestimate the power of kindness. What was that other little story which I told years ago about this monk in a monastery in some city somewhere, and early in the morning he heard a noise in the shrine room, and so he went in to investigate. First of all, he thought maybe one of the monks was getting up early to do some chanting or meditation, but then when he looked at the alarm clock, they wouldn't be getting up that early. So he went in to investigate, and sure enough, he saw there was a burglar in the shrine room trying to open the donation box. And the burglar had a knife in his hand trying to open the box. And then when the burglar saw the monk, "Who are you?" He said, "I'm the abbot of the monastery." "Get away! If you don't disappear quickly, I'll make you disappear with my knife." The burglar was really scary. And the monk said, "Are you trying to open the donation?" "Yes, none of your business, get out." And the monk put his hand in his pocket. "What are you up to?" said the thief. And the monk took out the keys. "Look, here's the keys. It's much easier to open the donation box with the keys than with the knife." "It says a trick." "No, here are the keys. Just leave it over there." And so the monk left the keys within reach of the burglar, and the burglar still kept the knife pointing at the monk. He didn't trust people. He took the keys and opened the donation box. There was a lot of money in there. And so the thief stuffed all his pockets with the money. He said, "Is this a trick?" "No, look, I've given you the money. These are donations for poor people. So I give it to you." And then the monk said, "But just wait a moment." "Yeah, it's a trick, isn't it? What are you up to?" "It's not a trick. Just in the cupboards, right above the donation box, in those cupboards we've got some of the food which was excess from the day before. Please take some. You look very hungry." "Yeah, I am." "Take as much as you want." And so the thief grabbed some of the food and stuffed it in his pockets as well. "And don't call the police, otherwise I'll be back and I'll stab you." And the monk said, "Why should I call the police? I've given you this money and I've given you this food. Just go in peace." And so the thief just opened the door and ran away. And the monk had to explain, to his committee, they know he was a thief, and he looked really poor and hungry. And so the committee said, "Okay, that's fine, well done. And you're the sort of monk which we respect." And so he saw in the newspaper the next day that thief was burglaring another house, and this time he got caught. He was sent to jail for 10 years. And 10 years and 1 day later, the monk, a lot older, didn't sleep as much as he used to, and was woken up in the middle of the night. There was a noise in the shrine room. He went to investigate. A burglar. The burglar had a knife, and next to the donation box, and the burglar said to the old monk, "Do you remember me?" And the old monk said, "Yeah, I remember you. Here are the keys." And that's when the burglar put down the knife. Said, "I don't want the keys. I've been released from jail now. And all those years in jail, for 10 years, I remembered you're the only person who's ever been kind to me. You gave me that money. And you even worried about whether I had enough to eat and gave me all that food. I remembered you. Last time I came here, I stole the wrong thing. I've come back here again. This time I want to kind of steal the secret of your peace, kindness, and your generosity. Please make me a monk." If you ever became a monk or a nun, what would you like to learn? How to get enlightened or give good talks? Would you like to understand the secret of kindness, of generosity, of non-judging, of helping? I don't think that's a true story, but it's based on many other stories which are very close to sometimes what really happens. So those are kind of stories which pack a really powerful message. And now it's now 9 o'clock. So that's all for today, folks. Sadhu, sadhu, sadhu. Did you enjoy that? I haven't talked very much, have I? Just told old stories. But they're powerful. Okay, so now what do we have now? Sorry? A what? Whatever, anyway. So make best use of your time, however you want to. Again, for lunchtime, I usually have to go over to Bodhinyana Monastery for my lunch, because there's also, I'm the boss there, other people who actually come and want to see me for this, that, and all sorts of stuff. We'll be back here for this afternoon. We have a sutta class at 3. And after the sutta class, we have the interviews. What time are they from? From 4:15, okay, to 5:15. Excellent, great. So in the interviews, it's not just like time to chill out with Ajahn Brahm. It has to be, real questions. Okay. Thank you for being here.